You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. This week, my guest is Build-A-Bear Workshop President and CEO Sharon Price John. Sharon took the reins at Build-A-Bear in 2013, and in just a few short years, helped revitalize the brand and lead the company through a financial turnaround. Since then, she and her team have continued to grow Build-A-Bear into a global sensation. The company has sold over 200 million bears around the world, and this year, the company is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Prior to Build-A-Bear, Sharon served as president of Stride Right Children's Group and held senior executive roles at Hasbro and Mattel. She is the author of the upcoming book, Stories and Heart, which releases in early 2023. It's filled with candid stories designed to inspire others to create meaningful change. After all, Sharon is no stranger to finding ways to expand horizons and make an impact. Sharon grew up in a small town in Tennessee. During her senior year of high school, she boarded an airplane for the very first time in her life. She took a trip to Europe that ultimately reshaped the entire vision she had for her future. Fast forward a few years, and shortly after college, Sharon was determined to get a job at an ad agency in New York. She flew to New York, slept on a friend's floor, interviewed at over a dozen companies, and landed a job. In our conversation, Sharon and I talked all about the power of finding your purpose, creating your own opportunities, and staying true to yourself. I can't wait for you to hear Sharon's story. There's something in it for all of us to learn. So let's pull the tarp and get straight to Sharon Price John. Sharon, it's great to have you. I know it's a big year at Build-A-Bear. 2022 marks the 25th anniversary of the company. But I want to start focused on you, Sharon, a little bit. I want to go all the way back. You grew up in a small town in Tennessee. Did you always dream of being a CEO of a big company? I'm curious. Tell me, what were you thinking as a little kid?
Wow. No, not the no. I'm not going to tell you what I was thinking, but no, I did not dream I would be a CEO of a company. I'm not quite sure I even knew what that was. I think I probably had the same dreams a lot of kids do, mine were a little more creative, if I could say, in the creative vein. I thought I would be an interior designer or a fashion designer or a writer or something like that. In some ways, I've become that, in that we make fashions for bears and we open stores and I do a lot of my own writing. So I have a book coming out. So sort of ended up doing that just in a more circuitous route. Had to become a CEO first.
Well, I want to get into it all, Sharon, and we're going to talk about the book. I'm excited to hear all about that project. I know it's coming in early 2023. One of the things I want to dig into, my understanding is that you had not been on an airplane, let alone out of the country. Senior year, you decide to take off and travel international. You go to Germany, Switzerland, Austria. How did that come about? And what led you to take on that adventure?
So that's a great question. And it does put me in the Wayback Machine. I'm actually going back in the next few weeks for my 40th high school reunion. I can't believe it myself, but I took 2 years of German language class. And if you had taken 2 years of German language class in my high school, they did offer you an opportunity to visit some German-speaking countries the January, February prior to our graduation. And after a lot of discussion with my father and mom, this was a big decision for me to travel so far away and having not been on a plane. Now, we took a lot of family vacations, don't get me wrong, but we really didn't fly anywhere. That to do this for a 2-week time period. And yes, it was just so eye-opening for me. It really, I can link that moment back to changing the trajectory of the path of my life because it was a massive reset on perspective. You define by all that you know how to define by. You compare and contrast only to those things that you're around, that you see, that you understand. And in some ways, I believe that it's not difficult to see how people might get to the other conclusion that by traveling, you might feel small and insignificant and oh, this small town doesn't matter. I'm even one of more people than I ever dreamed possible. But for me, it was, wow, I still am just me. I get along. I mean, I had, a mediocre grasp of the German language, but it was still an exciting experience where people were open, and I learned so much, and the history was so rich and amazing. And it was just I think it shifted my perspective so broadly. And I came back and immediately changed to the biggest college that I could find in my state, which was the University of Tennessee. And it changed just everything about what I wanted to do. I wanted to leave that summer instead of wait till the fall. I wanted to go to college and we couldn't wait. I was so pent up with energy about wanting to learn and grow and evolve. And just so happened of all the crazy things and how the universe moves and changes sometimes, it feels like, around you opening your mind. The World's Fair was being held in none other than Knoxville, Tennessee that summer, and I got a job there. And so thus started my journey.
Do you ever wonder, Sharon, if you didn't take that trip and it didn't kind of move you to apply to University of Tennessee and go to University of Tennessee, a big school, and that opportunity that presented itself you just described, do you ever wonder what would have been or what the path would have looked like?
I do. I have had that thought. At the same time, what I've learned is that if you're on a path that is legitimate and sincere, that you do seem to find a way. It just might not be the same steps. So I tend to imagine, because I already had a lot of those preconceptions of just being intellectually curious in my mind, that perhaps I would have gone to the smaller school and transferred to UT. Maybe I would have missed that or transferred somewhere. And I feel like that it probably would have started to feel small to me, and I probably would have reached out. But absolutely, would it have been that crazily magical? No, it wouldn't have been. And you can pull the string directly back to that. And then that exposure to so many people from around the world, having lived in a town of 7,000 my entire life, was remarkable. At a school of 30,000, it really did make me feel like every opportunity was out there if I so chose to chase it.
Speaking of chasing opportunity, shortly after you graduate college, you're working, you get on another plane, you go to New York, you sleep on a friend's floor or couch, you interview with a dozen different ad agencies, I think it was, you're looking for a new job. So what led you to hop on that plane again, but this time head to New York, and what was going into your career thought process there?
Wow. And it was the floor. Let's be clear. Don't upgrade me to the sofa.
It was the floor.
Sleeping on the floor. Well, during all of this time period of evolving and changing, I decided to set define some values around what I expected out of my life. And I did that in a marketing class. I was in this presentation where they were talking about a well-known marketing concept called price values. And my maiden name is Price. So now, I'm Sharon Price John, and that's the name I grew up with Sharon Price. And so I'm like, wow, price values, isn't that interesting? And of course, this isn't what it means at all. It means the relative cost of something is versus the relative value of something to any individual. It's why luxury goods can be overpriced, priced at a higher level, because we place innate value beyond utilitarian value. So anyway, beyond that, I'm like, what are my values? Who am I going to be as a person? What are the things that are going to keep me in the road or make me stretch? And I set price values based on my PRICE. And those values included, being like going for stuff, like being really driven. And I thought, if that's the kind of person that I'm going to be, if like my E was excellence, if I'm going to be an advertising major, where would I go if I was going to be excellent? And the only answer was New York. So I think that I never would have thought that that was a necessary step without setting these price values, and that I'd set a goal for myself to be excellent, do my very best to strive for excellence. And I set these goals. I didn't know anyone really in New York, and I didn't have any connections in New York, and decided when you don't know better, sometimes you do better, why can't I just get, 3 interviews a day in Manhattan? That seems reasonable. It's a small island. I could make that happen. I start cold calling. I've got this thing called the Red Book where everybody's listed. I'm picking out nice people, that person. And I do all this stuff. And I finally had this whole plan, all this, multi-step process of getting this. This is back in the day, just to be clear, I am typing these resumes, typing these letters, following up, on a landline. Like, this is hardcore stuff. And I'm setting up all of these interviews that I'm going to move around in Manhattan. I don't have, nobody's telling me how to get there on a phone. I've got to get from these interviews, just hard, old school, and get all that done.
Yeah.
This is an astronomical odds kind of thing, that I would do this with a goal of getting a job in a top 10 global agency in 1 week. That was my goal. And that's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. But I'm glad I didn't know any better, because I wouldn't have done it. And, sometimes when we know all the odds, we make choices that we probably shouldn't make, because even if the odds are bad, there's usually some percentage of somebody that makes it happen. Why not you? And so when I look back on it, I don't look back at it and say, oh, what a sad, silly little girl. I look at it and go, wow, I am so proud of that bold move. Even if she didn't know any better, I still want to give her a hug for giving that a shot. Because at the end of the day, DDB Needham did call me back for a second interview, and I got that job on the Friday of my last day in New York. Before leaving, I stayed through the weekend, but my last business day in New York. They made me the job offer. They did not give me the job offer in the moment. They said they would call me back, but that was not the way I had envisioned this in my head. So I took a deep breath and I said, I don't understand why you just can't make me the offer right now. And they did, and they offered me $24,000. And I said, I think it should be 25, because I've already worked in Knoxville and all the other guys just got out of college. Unbelievably, she gave me the raise in the moment and the job offer in the moment. But again, I think it's, partially because I didn't know any better, but I also had a very clear vision of what I wanted and believed that it was possible, and not probable, but sometimes all you need is possible to make choices in life.
Absolutely, Sharon. I'm like smiling ear to ear listening to you tell that story. I mean, and we won't upgrade it. You were sleeping on the floor, not on the sofa, and you were making it happen. Let's fast forward a bit. So 2013, you're hired as the president and CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshop. The company had a great brand, but the company wasn't short of challenges. You've led the company since then on an extraordinary transformation, bringing the company to profitability, transitioning it from the leadership of the founder. Talk about your decision to join Build-A-Bear. What drew you to Build-A-Bear? And what were you thinking about when you stepped into that role in terms of how you were going to tackle some of the challenges?
Yeah, well, you nailed it on what drew me to Build-A-Bear. I love brands. When you look back over my career, whether it's at Mattel or Hasbro or Stride Rite, I really love consumer-facing brands and tend to lean into children's brands or kid-centric kind of brands. And even in my ad days, I worked more in the confections industry on accounts such as M&M Mars and Hershey. So there's been a long expertise being built over the course of time of things that are ultimately targeted toward kids, but have a kid mom or kid adult kind of appeal or a filter. There's a, parental consent kind of thing where you're trying to build goodwill with the parent side and a relationship with them, as well as be appealing to kids. So that all made sense to me. And the brand, I felt, had a lot of pent up equity in it that had not yet been monetized, partially because we didn't have the mechanism to monetize it in multiple ways. So at that point, I'd been at Hasbro already for 7 years, and then at Stride Right, turning around a vertical retail company, Stride Right Children's Group, which has the footwear stores. So I learned a little bit about what it meant to run specialty retail, which I hadn't done before that. And that would have been an important piece of the puzzle for me to be able to unlock the value at Build-A-Bear. So you can imagine the combination of kids brands, the toy industry, and specialty retail, that there were a lot of boxes in my mind that were being checked on the possible, not the probable, because Build-A-Bear had been contracting 8 years in a row and had lost $49 million in 2012, the last full year before I came there. So there were some hills to climb. Now, I had read all of the financials and all the Ks and the Qs, and it kind of understood. And the company did still have a very solid balance sheet, no borrowings on its credit facility, and it also had good cash flow. So I had time. I figured I had time to pull us through this transitional shift, because at the end of the day, what needed to happen was we needed to understand that Build-A-Bear had become larger than its retail self. So you can sort of look back now and see how Hasbro has been going through and has gone through this same transition. That Hasbro basically was a toy company, right? It was a toy company that just happened to have created a lot of powerful intellectual property brands like My Little Pony and Transformers, that is pivoted into an intellectual property entertainment company that just happens to make toys, when you think about it. And I was there during that, one of the most pivotal moments that you can point to, which was the launch of the first Transformers film. And the irony of that, called Transformers, in that was the moment that really pushed Hasbro over the edge on the transformation of its own organization, is really poignant. But I felt like that there were enough similarities there that Build-A-Bear, if you think about it, was a mall-based specialty retailer that just happened to have created an intellectual property brand that had emotional connections with millions of people that had gone through that process, that you could then think about and utilize and stretch into different ways, because that emotional connection didn't mean stuffing a bear. It didn't mean being at retail. It meant love and friendship and relationships and making memories. And the last time, or my birthday, or whatever, going to being with friends. Those are really powerful tenets when you think about what your brand means. So we needed to pivot that from that retailer that just happened to have created a powerful piece of intellectual property to an intellectual property company that just happened to have vertical retail as one of its many rev streams. Now, what we needed to do was build out and create, and in some cases they were kind of there, but make them much more robust, processize, integration, digitize across multiple rev streams, right? So upgrade our international franchise business, build out our e-commerce business, figure out a way to amplify our e-commerce business. We had to fairly participate in the digital economy, even though we're known as a physical retailtainment company. You don't get to look at the fastest growing part of the economy and ignore it as a company that sells things to people. So you've got to figure out how are you going to fairly participate in that. And then we also started, and I won't say started, but reinvented and re-energized our outbound licensing business. And what that is where Build-A-Bear, the brand, is translated into categories outside of our expertise, like bicycles or bedding or pet toys, which we just announced. So the Build-A-Bear brand is on there, but we're working with other people who it's their expertise to create those particular products and sell them through the channels that sell those products. Or most notably, Build-A-Bear Entertainment, which we've now had multiple movies and we have multi-year dimensional relationships with a number of best-in-class partners. So a lot of excitement in that space. And our brand is stretchable enough to do things like that. At the same time, we evolved our retail footprint away from traditional malls into more tourist locations. So there's just been so much going on. And of course, in the midst of that, we're hit with the retail apocalypse or Brexit or COVID. And I'm happy to say that because of this powerful team and because of the diversification of the model, which was inclusive of upgrading and significantly evolving our e-commerce business, by the end of 2021, post-COVID, we had our most profitable year in history. And we most recently announced the most successful first half in the history of the company in terms of both rev and profitability.
Absolutely remarkable, Sharon. I mean, what an incredible transformation and an incredible story and an evolution of a brand that means so much, like you said, to so many. I'm curious, when you go down that path of being in the entertainment and the experience space, and you're a brand that is tugging on so much emotion for people and families and communities, how do you make sure that your team, I mean, it's a massive team. You have over 500 global retail locations and everything else that you just described there. There's so many touch points for the average consumer with Build-A-Bear. How do you make sure that the experience is up to where it needs to be, the Build-A-Bear standard?
Thank you. Another great question. I mean, and thank you for noticing that we have multiple touch points. That has not always been the case. That's a part of the creation of this integrated solution where our guests and our valued customers can bounce from experience to experience, that each experience leads to another. And I'll explain how we get the team all up to speed in a second. But that idea of the surround sound of engagement is important. And that we are very conscious of how in each touch point, how we then encourage that next engagement or touch point. So let's say you see an ad on, so say it's a Facebook ad, and you click on that, you go online, you might go to our Bear Builder 3D, which is a really kind of a pseudo VR experience that you can go through, really fun for the younger set. Or if you're older, we have like collectibles and licensed products that are really targeted toward the teens, tweens, and older. Like we have something on our website called the Bear Cave, where it's age gated for you to get in to see the Deadpool bear, the Matrix bear. So we've expanded our consumer base and had to create these different touch points for something that we call, well, it's known in the industry as specific journeys based on the consumer and who that consumer is and what they're interested in and what they're buying and why they're buying and why they're there. So then you go from the website that might encourage you to plan a store trip or plan a party, which once you're in the store, there'll be some encouragement. Oh, did you know we had our Honey Girls movie is on Netflix? You should see that. Then you watch Netflix, then you want to go back and get your Honey Girl product and buy some of the music, which then encourages you to go to Build-A-Bear Radio, that we have a partnership with iHeartRadio that then serves up an ad for you to go back to Build-A-Bear or buy a Build-A-Bear bike, so it's the surround sound of engagement. And we train people by one, I think, having a very clear mission, which is to add a little more heart to life. And that heart is really just the heart symbol, because people put a lot of things in that heart. And it's so reflective of the iconic Build-A-Bear process. If you've been to Build-A-Bear, you'll know that you pick your furry friend, then you go to this big, crazy stuffing machine, and there's somebody called a bear builder with an apron that kind of walks you through the process. And a part of that process includes not only you getting to stuff your bear, but you get to put a little red satin heart in the bear. And this year, a silver heart for our 25th anniversary. But you make a wish on that bear. You imbue it with all kinds of, wonderful things, whether he's smart or he's strong or he can protect you from, monsters under your bed or whatever you want to put in there that he can do because they're supernatural, as you know. And then that's literally the little more heart to life. And we try to do that with everything that we do, whether it's a guest engagement or it's the marketing that we're doing or the communications that we choose or the products that we develop. And that process, as well as the training, which is very important, even our filtering process on who works at Build-A-Bear and who doesn't. And sometimes I just say, just the very fact that we're Build-A-Bear, I think there's already a filter for the people that apply. Like, who comes to Build-A-Bear and applies for a job if you don't like stuffed animals or you don't like kids or you don't like to have fun or you don't like to smile? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
I can tell you, Sharon, a few weeks ago when I was at the local Build-A-Bear, I dropped my daughter off for her Girl Scout troop to have their day making their Girl Scout Build-A-Bears. Everybody was smiling. What an experience it was for all. And it's something that, I know my daughter and her friends, I'll definitely remember for a long time. I know, speaking of the word heart, you have a book coming out in a few months. It's called Stories and Heart. And you call it a blueprint for making meaning in modern times. And I'm curious, Sharon, how do we create more meaning in our lives? And how do we see the power of our own personal stories?
Yeah, so it really is a collection of stories that span different parts of my past. And you brought up some of them that are talked about in the book that I look back on and can connect dots on how I ended up doing what I do every day. And I think that it's good to pause and look back on those stories and try to see your own journey. And the interesting piece of it is the lessons that I learned during these stories, and I share them. And some of them are funny and some of them are goofy and some of them are painful. But at each moment, it gave me this opportunity to both reflect on, wow, that particular situation changed the way I thought about this or I thought about that. And that then led to something else. And I've never paused and put all of those things together. I also was very a student. I would call myself a student of sort of self-reflection. And I don't know where any of that came from, but certainly of creating tools and mechanisms and habits that I thought would be helpful for me to evolve, whether it's career-wise or as a human being. And I share some of these things that I kind of created over the course of time, whether it's a tendency to be goal-oriented and write my goals, to dream big, asking, questions when I'm thinking about or setting my own values, as I shared with you before, or asking questions about, one of my famous ones that people talk about is the what's the worst thing that can happen when you're thinking about what you should or shouldn't do or should or shouldn't try, or whether I should ask for that raise in the last second. What's the worst thing that can happen? And I'm sure that went through my mind. Is she could say, oh, no, this is our policy and we're going to start you at $24,000 a year. And I would have said, oh, okay, that's fine. I understand that. And that would have been the end of it, right? But that extra $1,000 meant a lot to me in Manhattan in my 5-floor walk up over a Chinese restaurant. So, it might have been the difference between, me getting a meal or taking a sandwich from the daily lunch that they offered, the training program, the tray, right? So, sometimes we think about our past and we limit ourselves so much by interpreting things that have happened in a very disempowering way, when it doesn't have to be that way. You've created a narrative around it, thus the stories and heart, that is now disempowering, but it's only disempowering because of the way perhaps you've chosen to interpret it and allow it to impact the choices that you make in the future.
Well, Sharon, this has been such a fantastic conversation. I've enjoyed learning from you. 25 years of Build-A-Bear now, over 200 million bears sold around the world, 500 global retail locations, and so many other touch points with everybody, as we talked about. You continue to add a little more heart to life every single day. And like I like to say on this show, there is no question you are a tart puller. The team at Build-A-Bear are tart pullers, and to to transform the business, in particular since 2013, the way you did, and navigate all of the challenges, Brexit, COVID, and everything else just on a daily basis. Absolutely remarkable. So thank you for sharing a bit of your story. Good luck, with everything the rest of the way. I can only imagine the next 25 years are going to be even better.
Thank you, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.